When I was 17, I met a man at a diner. I saw him every day. He always sat in my section, and he always ordered the same thing. 3 eggs over easy, grits, toast, and coffee. Leave the pot. I guess I kind of developed a crush on him. He was handsome, but was far too old for me. He looked like he could be in his late 20s, his early 30s, or even his middle 40s all at once. He looked weathered, like he'd seen it all, but when he smiled and thanked me, I could tell that there was still some childhood left in him. We were sitting around a fire near the back of the park, something we did sometimes when we weren't working, and telling stories. There were about 7 of us, myself, Emma, Gala, Randy, Michael, Tobias, and Razzie. Tobias had been the last one to join us, and we were passing a skin of wine around as we threw deadfall wood onto the fire. He'd watched us from the door of the greenhouse, contemplating whether he wanted to come and sit with us or not, and had finally taken a seat next to Randy as he watched the night sky twinkle. As Brandylow, we didn't need to sleep, but we liked to rest sometimes and listen to the world pass. That probably sounds weird, but when you have the kind of time that we have, it's just something that you do. One day there was a robbery. This was in the middle of the Great Depression, and people were getting desperate to find their families. He wore a mask, but I knew the kid with the gun when he told me to empty the register. He was a local. Hell, we went to school together, and I knew that he and his girl were planning to go to California so he could find work. The town had dried up. We all knew it, but the diner had made decent enough scratch off the passers-by. He took the $9.30 we had for the day, and then he started demanding people's wallets. They gave him the wallets, not wanting trouble, until he came to the man that I'd seen. The guy told him that he couldn't have it, and when he threatened to shoot him, he told him he was welcome to try. Emma wasn't telling just any story. She was telling her story, the story of how she'd become a Brandylow, and it made me wish that I had a better origin story. So many of them had lived through great times and seen great things, and I was just given the title by association. I knew I had earned it through service to the lady, but it didn't seem like that. It didn't seem like I had earned it the way that others had. They had achieved it by being found worthy by other Brandylow, worthy enough to be turned in exchange for their creators' lives. He tried to shoot the guy, but the gun went off and the man wasn't even hurt. He reached out and took it from the boy, telling him to leave it before he hurt someone. "Leave those wallets too," he told him. "You didn't earn any of that, and times are too tough for you to be greedy." The kid dropped everything and walked out, gunless and penniless. He and his gal still left, I think, but they did it without stealing. She got a faraway look, and the smile she wore was genuine as she remembered the man who had ushered her into this life. I began to talk to him after that, sitting with him as he ate his meals and asking him how he had done that. He said it had been nothing. The kid hadn't been trying to hit him anyway. I didn't think that was true, but I didn't argue with him. A few months later, he offered to buy me dinner. I thought he was being flirty, but after a few drinks, he told me what he was and asked if I wanted to be it too. She took a big swig of wine as it came to her, her eyes a little misty when she passed it. After the first drink, he did something with the second and made it glow. I laughed. I thought it was just a little trick, but he covered it with his hand before I could take it. "Once you drink this, there's no going back. You have to finish what you started, for better or worse." I told him I could handle whatever he thought he had, and drank it down fast. It burned a little, but I was tipsy by then. So tipsy that I barely recognized how his features were changing. By the third drink, I was starting to notice his goaty appearance, and when I reached for the last drink, I remember thinking that he might start to baa, like a sheep. He sighed when I finished that one, saying it would be good to rest, and he hoped that I had a long life. After that, I was left with an empty chair and a new life, knowing that one day it would be my turn to return the favor. She passed the skin to Razzie, a brandylow who looked like she had been turned in her early teens, and she tilted it back as she savored the bouquet. Her size seemed to hinder her very little, and I'd seen her do things that I would have otherwise thought impossible, like lifting trees out of displays after a windstorm not too long ago had put them out of place and setting them to rights again. I knew from those around her that she also wasn't some ancient creature, and this was just a reflection of her own inner strength. I wish I'd gotten to know the man who gave me his life better. I was walking home after school, cutting through the woods like I usually did, when I heard strange noises off the path. Mom had always told me to be careful in the woods, but I guess I didn't think bears or mountain lions would make a racket like that. I got low and went creeping into the trees, and there he was, just lying on the ground. Something had cut him up pretty badly, and he was holding his guts in when I came up. There was ice on him, something I hadn't expected to see in August, and as it melted on his shirt, he looked at me with surprise. "It's not safe here," he gasped, gritting his teeth as he tried to act tough. "You should go back before they smell you." "I'm not going to leave you here to die alone," I said, not sure why I'd said it, only feeling that it's what I should say. He smiled at me, offering me a hand of his own blood, like some kind of offered cup. I don't know why I drank it, but it just looked so inviting. It shimmered with an eldritch light, the surface rippling and dancing like nothing I'd ever seen. I knelt beside him, drinking slowly from that thick and pungent soup, and after the third sip, he was gone, and I was changed. I never went home. I never saw my family again. After that last drink of his offered cup, I belonged to the lady. She took another sip and looked around, finally holding it out for Toby. Toby started to decline, but Razzie shook it at him. "Come on, Tobes, you never talk about yourself. You've been with the lady for longer than anyone else. What's your story?" Toby did a half shake, but finally reached out and took the skin, taking a long drink as he savored the wine. His little glasses glinted in the firelight, and I thought that it might be the only time I had ever heard him talk for more than a few minutes. Toby spent most of his time in the greenhouse, tending the plants, and he really only spoke to the lady, not sharing more than a passing word with the other gardeners who worked with him. He was an enigma, but after that night, I felt I truly knew him better. Most brandylow only have a set amount of time. You all know this. We all know this. But I am unique in that respect. They all leaned in, most of them having hoped he would tell his story. I was an alchemist, one of the first scientists in Northern Europe in the 16th century. The church had chased me out of my village, claiming I was a witch or of the devil, but I was living comfortably in the forest with the equipment I had purchased from merchants and some supplies I had collected. It was not a fabulous life, but it was good enough for a man on the run. He took another sip, smacking his lips as he stared at the fire. One night, a woman came to visit me. She was sick and had been wandering half naked in the woods. She said she was being pursued by someone, an enemy from her past, and I felt pity for her. Who better to understand being pursued than an outlaw? I told her that she could rest in my cave, and I would try to figure out what was ailing her. She agreed, and I set to work, looking for a cure to her mystery ailment. Whatever her adversary had hit her with, it was a nasty bit of poison, and it was slowly killing her. I'd never seen anything like it before, but it turned out to be similar to herbicide. I managed to neutralize it. No easy feat when all you have to work with are plants and fungi, but I managed it. The smile he wore was similar to Emma's, the memory of his victory over this unknown poison, clearly a good one. It was while trying to cure this poison that I first encountered her adversary. I was looking for moss, a special kind that grew in the deeps, when I heard hoofbeats. It wasn't rare to hear horses in the woods, but it was uncommon to hear them this deep in the woods. Horses would have trouble getting through the trees, and I got low as I waited for them to pass. Eventually they did, but no sooner was I hunting again than I heard the hoofbeats. They seemed to follow me as I went deeper and deeper into the forest, and I finally stopped and decided to confront the rider. It no longer sounded like many animals, maybe as few as one, and I liked my chances of getting away in this part of the forest. I knew the woods better than anyone, and I believed I was capable of escaping, if it came to it. He shuddered like an icy wind had touched him, and I thought I knew who might be after our pale lady. My confidence broke when he came out of the trees. His armor was the green of a spruce tree, his helmet topped with a rack of magnificent antlers. His horse was bony, emaciated, and looked dead beneath him, despite its powerful strides. He had an axe attached to his saddle, and though it was the end of summer, I felt a chill run through me as his hollow-looking helmet settled on me. It looked empty, but I saw 2 coals sparking beneath that visor, and knew it was anything but. "I seek a woman," he said, his voice like a winter wind. "Have you seen a pale woman running through these woods? She may be sick, and I hope to find her before it's too late." I didn't believe a word of it. It sounded as if he hoped to kill her before the poison could, and I found myself shaking my head slowly. I don't think he believed me either, and knowing what I do now, I have no idea why he left me alive. Maybe he simply wasn't at the strength he needed to lift that axe yet, but I doubt it. Most likely, he just didn't consider me a threat and decided it would be better to let me go. Given his parting words, perhaps he thought human greed might win out in the end, because before he turned away, he looked back and offered one final chance for me to join him in his hunt. "If you should find her, seek me out. I will pay you handsomely for her whereabouts." Then he rode off into the woods, and as I watched him go, I saw ice settle on the ground where the hooves of his horse had been. We all sat in silence for a minute, listening to the fire crackle and sharing the wine around to curb the sudden emergence of a chill that had gone through all of us. When I came back with the moss, using it to neutralize the poison, she smiled at me and said she was in my debt. After a few days, after she had regained her strength, I told her about the Green Knight, and she asked if I had told him where she could be found. I told her if I had, she would likely be dead, and I doubted his intentions were good. She thanked me and asked me if I wanted a place by her side as a reward. At first I thought she was implying marriage, but she clarified that she would be happy to take me into her court. I could use someone as skilled with plants as you, and I would feel safer with you at my side. I thought then that she might be some royal involved in a court dispute, but as I turned to decline, she seemed to beg me to reconsider before I'd said a word. She is hard to say no to, as many of you know. So I agreed, and she told me to kneel. I stood up as Brandylow, a maid Brandylow, and my time ends when fate declares it so, not when another must rise. He looked at Randy and I when he said it, and I got the feeling that he wasn't just talking to talk. Were we somehow special too? I got up to follow him as the flask went around again, and he began to head back to the greenhouse. I asked him if Maid Brandylow were different than the rest, and he nodded. He pointed back to the fire, indicating the others as they laughed and joked, and his look was a little sad. When it's time to pass their powers on, they have no choice in the matter. A day, a year, 1,000 summers, none of them know how long they have. You and I, however, do not have that burden. We are Brandylow until we decide to stop. We can be killed. We can fall to the forces of winter. But we can make others freely, without worrying about being unmade. This is done strictly at the lady's discretion, of course, but we are special in that way. He looked back at the fire as Razzie made them laugh and shook his head. I wonder how many of them will still be there when the snows leave. How many new faces will sit where they sat? How many will simply be gone forever? Who can say? He left after that, and I was left to stand and wonder. You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story? Or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad and Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Saikat, Lee Kendall, Janet, and Chris Kinsella for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. And of course, thanks to Xaronan, Winter, Tyler Parker, Stephanie Carrington, Sarah ASMR, Hi Stacy, Emily Coltsfoot, and Cinnamon Fox, and Bella Lee for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. As I said, if you'd like to have your name read out at the end of every episode that I make, and maybe get a little more, come on down to Patreon and sign up, or become a member on YouTube. Ghostly Reader tier contributors get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. So, what are you waiting for? Come on down and give it a look. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.